Hi guys, so welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to create this rock, paper, scissors game using JavaScript. So let me show you the demo. So currently you have rock, paper, and scissors. So you are supposed to choose one of them, and then the computer chooses its own, and then the same is compared, and whoever wins gets a win. So right now I picked a scissors and the computer picked the rock. So the rock crashes the scissors, so the computer wins. All right. If I pick the rock this time, so I pick the rock, the computer picks scissors, and then you can see the border turns green, showing you it's a win. And also you get you won here on the bottom. This time round, let me pick the paper. So I picked paper, computer picked rock, and then I won because paper folds up on the rock. And then lastly, I can pick the scissors again. So you see it's a draw. When it's a draw, we get a blue border on the card. The computer picked the scissors, and then it's a tie. So right now I picked rock, and the computer picked paper. So the computer won, and you get a red border showing you that you lost. So to get started, there is this repository that I'll link down in the description. So go ahead and clone this repository. So as always, we do have two branches. The initial branch, which has the HTML, and the master branch, which has everything that we might need. So go ahead and clone this repository and then switch to the initial branch, or clone the single branch. So clone the single branch, which is the initial branch. All right, so let me open my terminal and get started. So just cd into YouTube, JS, and then cd, let me create a new folder here. Then cd projects. And then what you have to do is come and copy the SSH link if you're using SSH. If you're using HTTPS, go ahead and copy the HTTPS link. And then from there on, we can do git clone, and then you clone that URL or that repository. And then we go straight up to creating the project. So the project has been created successfully. So let me open it in VS Code. So you can do code and then the folder name, or you could do cd into rock, paper, scissors, and then do code dot, which opens the directory. So by saying dot, you specify the directory, which is, it means the current directory. But assuming I was in the previous directory, I could still do code and then provide the directory I want to go into instead of cding and using the code period, but still the same way. So this is our project. So let me just zoom in a little bit. So we'll start with the HTML. The HTML has, let me zoom out a little bit. So whatever the HTML has this text, which is the heading, which says rock, paper, scissors. And this corresponds to rock, paper, scissors. All right. So, and then the next thing we have is the text. You play versus the computer. You play versus the computer. And then we have those images, which one has the rock, paper, and scissors, which are inside this actions div. So let me zoom out. Just want you to see, so you can see this is our div here. So this is the div of ID card. So this is the whole card. So this is the div of this whole card. It has a heading, it has this, and then it has these three images which signify the action. So the first one will be for the rock, paper, and scissors. And then we have an attribution for the background image. So the background image, this lizard here on the background, this is the attribution which is positioned fixed absolute to the body. So inside the card we have those 3 images, and each image has its own ID. We're going to use this ID later on when we are referencing a specific action or a specific element. And then so those are the 3 actions, and then the final one we have is the results. We have the results here. Inside the results we have an empty user pick. So the user pick is basically showing what the user picked. So in my scenario you can see you picked the rock, so this one shows what the user picked. And then you have what the computer picked. So what the computer picked, this one computer picked. So we do have another one called summary. So this one would be a summary that shows, we're not going to work with this, but let me just, I can even remove it. So the summary, the intention of the summary was to have a summary that says, if you picked rock and computer picked paper, there's a way paper defeats the rock. As in, the paper is like the rock. If you pick the rock and I pick the scissors, rock crushes scissors. So that was the summary that I was intending to add here, but I could leave that to you as an exercise. So the next one we have is the display and the display heading. So this one will show this. So this is the display and the display heading. So that's it for the HTML. And then for the CSS, we have linked the CSS files. This one is already built. So the CSS is already built. You can see this is all the CSS we have. We have the background images, we have the specs. But for this tutorial, we're not going to talk about CSS. We're going to talk about JavaScript and how JavaScript can help us create the rock, paper, scissors game. So what I will do is that, because I forgot, I need to switch to the initial branch. So I have switched to the initial branch, which doesn't have anything in the script, and we are going to create this step by step. So let's get started. So the script is already linked to the HTML using the script tag at the end of the body, and the reason we have it at the end is because the script has to run after every other HTML element has been rendered, because if you put this on the top, then you render a script manipulating items that have not already been painted to the DOM. All right, so let me close that, and then we need to serve this HTML into the browser. We have an extension called Go Live, so you can go to the extension and search Live Server. And as soon as you search this extension and install it, then you go to that specific HTML file you want to serve, and then click Go Live on the bottom. So it goes live. So currently nothing is working because we have not yet hooked up the JavaScript. We are going to write the JavaScript step by step. So the very first thing I want to do is that I want to add event listeners to these elements. So we have 3 elements which signify our actions. So we need a way to first grab these elements and add an event listener to listen for a click, and whenever a user clicks on either of these items, that will be the user pick value. So if I click the scissors, my user pick will be scissors, and then we let the computer pick its own, and then we can check and see who got the right answer, or who crashes who, or who won. All right. So let's start it. So the first thing I want to do, let me just split this so that you can see clearly. So the very first thing, as I said, I want to grab these 3 images which signify each action each element that I want to pick. Either I want to pick the rock, either I want to pick the paper or the scissors. So we have two ways we could do this. The first way is to grab each item and add an event listener to each item. So this is what we could do. We could do const rock. We could say document dot query selector. We can use query selectors here. We can use get element by ID. So basically these are methods that help us access the DOM. As we said in the previous tutorial, that the DOM is none other than a JavaScript object-oriented way of representing the HTML such that the document, which signifies the whole document, has methods, and a method is a function in an object. So this document, which is a tree-like structure that converts each element in the DOM as an object, which JavaScript can work with. So the document has so many methods. We do have get element by ID. We do have get element by class names. These are methods that are used to grab items from the DOM. All right. So in case I want this h1, I could get it via the tag name. So the tag name is h1. I could get it via the class name. I could give this a class. My heading. Let me just show you that. So if I want to get a reference of my heading, I could do document. We say the document is the whole document and it has methods to help us work with the DOM. So document dot get element by class name. All right. And then you pass in the class, which is my heading. So by doing this, we have given ourselves time. We have given ourselves the ability to grab a DOM element from the DOM and store it in a variable. So this heading represents this whole heading, and we can do everything we want with it. We can change the colors, we can change the background colors, we can add event listeners, we can do all what we want. And by adding an event listener means I want to add an event that listens for a specific event type. So if I click on this element, let me go back to the DOM. If I click on this element, that's an event that we could add an event listener for it such that it sits there waiting to capture that event and then it runs some sort of code. So without further ado, let me show you what we could do. So if you did want to get the rock reference, so let me do console const rock is equals to document.get element by ID. I could do get element by ID of rock. And then I could copy paste this and get the paper, and then the ID is paper. And then I could go ahead and grab the scissors and the scissors. But this is not a very nice way of doing the things. So let me just zoom out. This is not a very nice way of doing this because we'll continue to add event listener. So we can say add event listener. So the event listener picks up two arguments. The first argument is what type of event do you want us to listen for in this element? So you want to listen to the click. And then what function do you want to run as soon as we capture this event? So the first thing you could do is to add this inline and then do the code there. Or you have another option, which is we could create an external function and then we can create it below or above, because JavaScript has a concept called hoisting, which essentially takes all the declarations to the top of the file, even if it was declared after. So I could call a function here, but I declared the function beneath here. So I can say function handle click. That is the syntax of the event listener. So the event listener takes in two arguments. The first argument is what type of event do you want us to listen on? You can listen on the click, you can listen on the double click, the drag, all that. Let me show you. We have about, blur, cancel, all this. So, but for our case, we want to listen for the click. And then what handles when we get that event captured. So what happens when someone clicks, we capture it, and then this one is what acts on the actual act of clicking. So this is what I could do, and then I could duplicate this for all the three. So this one would be paper, and then scissors. So this is not the best way to do it because we are basically repeating the whole concept. We could change the variable names of the functions or maybe call the same function. Yeah, that could be. But we have a simpler way, which is because all these three are inside the actions element or the div, we could grab the actions div. So we could do const actions is equals to document dot. We also have another newer method called the query selector, which now you pass the whatever you want to work on. So for a class, you use the dot. For an ID, use the hash. And for the tag, you don't use anything. Right? So the actions. So this one will grab us the whole div of actions. And this div is children are what we want to add an event listener on. So we have access to the actions div. So to get the children, we have another property called dot children on the specific element. So we could do const children is equals to actions dot children. So you grab the children. So this one will hold an array. So this one will hold. So this one will hold an array. Or you can even console log them. There's no need of .log. Then we can console log the children. Go back to the browser. Inspect. Check. So it's a collection of three elements. So you have the image with the log, rock, paper, and scissors. So it's a HTML collection. So you see we get each item. You can see this is an image. We have all its method or everything. So the next thing we could do is we have the children, which we have all the three, 1, 2, 3. So we can add an event listener by looping over those children. So we could do array dot from children. So let's console log this and see. Let's do console.log array dot from children. Let's see what we get. So the array dot from children gives us an array. So the previous one we had is a HTML collection, but this time we have an array of all these three items. So you can see we have an array of the image with the ID of rock, the image with the ID of paper, and the image with the ID of scissors. So this array dot from children gives us an array, and then from that array we can loop over those arrays. So we can do for each item in the array, which corresponds to each item, which is an element, which is an image. So for each child, and then our function, we can say child dot add an event listener. Now instead of doing what we did previously, whereby we were adding event listeners by hand to each element, we can add an event listener while looping over the children. And then as we said, the event listener takes in two arguments. The first argument is what type of an event you want to handle. So I want to capture the click event, and who handles when we capture that. So I can create the function up here, handle click, which takes in an event, and then you can leave it at that. So whenever any of these children, so whenever this JavaScript file runs, it will go over all these three children, adding an event listener to each child, and each child will be handled by this handle click function. So we pass like that. And as I said, let me just add an event listener to the actions to show you, is that we could grab a click and then pass the function inline. You don't need to create the function outside, but if the code logic becomes too much, you need to pull it out so that it is easier to use. You can write this. This is still a function, but the function is not yet called because the function will be called, this function will be called by JavaScript as soon as the event is captured. So this function is not yet called. If you wanted to call this function, you could do that. But it's not our duty to call the function. The duty of calling the function is after the event is captured. So when the event is captured on each child, the handle click function is called and it is passed in that event. So let's console log the event and see what that event holds. So if I click the rock, you can see it's a pointer event. It has so many variable properties. So we have, is it trusted, is it alt key, the altitude angle, all these client. All right, default prevented, false. We have the source of the element, we have the target, we have the tilt x, we have the view. We have, this event is carrying the data of who was clicked essentially. So if we go back, this will carry us who was clicked. It will tell us who was clicked. So if I go back, we have something called the target. So the event dot target, and the target is the actual element, and then there's a very specific key we are looking for, the ID. So we said the image element has an ID of rock, and by adding an event listener and capturing that event is carrying the ID as well. So we can use this ID to identify what has been clicked, because we did a loop over the element. We currently don't know which element was clicked. So we are going to the event.target.id to grab the ID of the item that was clicked. So if I go back, we can log the event.target.id. We get the rock, the paper, and the scissors. So until that point, we know what did the user pick. So if I pick the paper, the program will know that I picked paper. If I pick the rock, the program knows I picked the rock. So the next issue we are facing right now is that we need now to let the computer choose, because we have chose ourselves. We have clicked the paper. We already know this is a paper. Now we need the computer to pick so that we can now start comparing. So the next step is to let the computer pick for itself. Excuse. So to let the computer pick, I'll create an array of the choices to let the computer pick. So we have different method we could use to let the computer pick, but I'll use the basic example that we can find. So we have the rock. So this one will match the IDs so that we can be able to verify what the user clicked, what the computer chose, and then we can see who won. And then we can go to scissors and then paper. Something is wrong, so we need to write variable name. So we created the choices for the computer. The next thing is that we need the computer to generate a sample. We need the computer to generate a sample ID from 0, 1, 2, so that using that ID we can get what the computer chose. All right. Yes. So the first thing I need to do is that I need to know how can I make the computer generate a random number from 0, 1, and 2. And to do that, I'm going to show you using the node. So I'm going to show you using the node interpreter. So yes, so I'm going to show you using the node interpreter. So by just simply, it's called the node repo. Repo also means read interpret. So it's this. read, evaluate, print loop. Yeah, so it's called a repo. So I'm going to show you. So we can do node. We get into the node environment. And then what I want to show you is something called, so math. So math is a library that can give us a random number. So let me just show you. So math.random. So the math.random function, the math.random function. So the math is a library, the random is a function. So the random function of the math gives us a value from 0 to 1. So using that, we can generate a value. Let's say we wanted to generate a random number from 0 to 10. So we could do math.random, then multiply by 10. We get 9.0. If we repeat that, 6.9. So what can we do to get a whole number? We can use something called math.flow. So we can do math.flow, and then you give it math.random times 10. So what this does, it takes in this number and then flows it. By flowing means take it to the nearest lower whole number. So if this is 6.9, so 6.9 when passed to the random.flow, so the math.flow, it goes to 6 because it goes downwards, rounding off downwards. That's how it does. So if we wanted the if we do this, we multiply by 3, we get a random number from 0 to 2. So no matter how many times I do this, we always get a number less than 3. So if we flow that down, we can get a number from 0 to 2. So we could do math.flow and then math.random and then times 3. And then now you're getting whole numbers from 0 to 2. I hope you understand about that. So let's go back to our code. So we are going to create something called a utility function. So we can say function get random 0 to 2. I'm trying to be descriptive. And then what we can return here is that we said we get a random number from 0 to 3, but it won't get to 3. So 0 to 2 up to around 2.9, we can do math.random, then you multiply by 3. And then if you flow down this, we'll get a random number from 0 to 2. So you can do math.flow. This one is going to give us a random number from 0, 1, 2. All right. As soon as we do have that, the next thing we need to work on is a way for us to calculate the result of the, I'm going to pick. So using this method, we can grab a random index from 0 to 2. And then using that index, we can get what the computer has guessed. So I'm going to create yet another function. Then I'll call it function calculate result. So this one is what is going to calculate the result. The first thing it picks is what did the user pick. And then let's make our computer pick. The computer already can pick a random number from 0 to 2. So what we could do is that we can create a variable called computer pick is equals to, we get the random number from 0 to 2. And then how do you get an element from an array using its index? You use array indexing. So we are going to do choices of the random index. So this one can either give us rock, scissors, and paper. So as soon as we get what the computer pick, we already have what the user picked. So we can continue by doing we can create a variable called winner that is going to track our winner, and then we can let's use a switch case. So we can say switch, we're switching on what did the computer pick. So whatever you are picking here is either a rock, scissors, or paper, depending on what did the computer pick. And then we are going to match out that. So we do have 3 cases. The first case is rock. So if the computer pick is rock, what do we do? Right? So if the computer pick is rock, the first thing we need to do is that we check if the user picked a rock. So if the user picked a rock, so the switch statements is switch, we have to use a T there. So the switch statements is switching against the computer's pick. All right. And then, so the computer pick can only be 3 things. So either a rock, a scissors, and a paper. So we'll start with the first case, which is a rock. So if the computer picks a rock and you pick a rock, this is a tie. So the winner, you can say winner is equals to tie. You can use a tie. Else if, so you have only 2 options left. The computer picked in a paper. So you can say, no, the user now, we already in the computer's pick zone, which is the rock. The computer picked the rock. So the user now can maybe, let's check whether they picked the paper. And then if the user picked the paper and the computer picked the rock, so the user picked the paper, the computer picked the rock, the user wins. All right, because the paper folds the rock. So the winner is the user. And then since this is the final one and it is a mandatory to be there, we're not going to check. We're going to use an else. And this scenario is whereby the user picks the scissors, but you're not going to write that else if, because this is the final option and there's no other way it could be not the scissors. So it's the scissors versus the rock. So the computer win. So we do computer. And then since this is a switch statement, we need to break to prevent it from checking all the other cases. All right, so we go to the next case, which is paper. So this is if the computer picks the paper, we start with if the user picked the rock. So if the user picked the rock, the computer picked the paper, the computer wins, right? Because the paper folds on the rock. So we can say winner is the computer. All right. Then we check the next thing, which is else if user picked rock, paper, scissors. So we go to the paper. If the user picked paper, the computer picked paper, this is the tie. So winner is the tie. And then the else, we are not going to check. So the else is for the scissors. If there is the scissors versus the paper, so the user wins. Then remember to break here to prevent the switch statement from going all the way to the bottom of the checks. So the final one is the scissors, right? We can use scissors or use the default because this is the last case and the last case will always be scissors. So whether we write it or not, it will still be scissors. So we can just write it. So we have the scissors and then we start with the user picked the rock. So if the computer picked the rock, the user picked. If the computer picked the rock, the user picked the scissors, the computer won. Oh no. The computer is the one with the cases. So the computer picked the scissors, the user picked the rock, the user won. So winner is equals to user. Else if we say user pick is equals rock, paper. So we go to paper. And then we do winner is equals to. So if the user picked the paper, the computer picked the scissors, then the scissors cut the paper. So we do computer wins. And then finally, we are not going to write the else if because this is the final one and it will always be rock, paper, scissors. So this time the user picked the scissors in the computer. So the user here picked the scissors and the computer picked the scissors. So this is a tie. So we say winner is equals to tie. And then we also can break, because later on, if we come to add more cases and forget to add the bracket, they'll go all the way. So after switching, by the time we reach here, we already have the winner. So the winner will either be tie, computer, and user. So we can return that and say return, can return the winner and what did the computer pick. So this one is similar to doing winner equals, to returning an object winner equals winner computer pick. So the short form for this in JavaScript, if you have the same key and value, you can remove this and it will make them as you had them previously. So as soon as we have that, we have a way to calculate the result. So we already know who won and who did the computer pick. And on top here, we already know what the user picked. So I could remove this. So we are still in the hard click function. We are not using the calculate function yet. This one is being used by the calculate result. So I can say const user pick is equals to e.target.id. I already showed you how to use the e.target. So the e.target will give us rock or paper or scissors. So we have what the user picked, and then we can call a function calculate result, pass it what the user picked. So calculate result, pass it what the user picked. So the calculate results take in what the user picked, and then we do all our switch, and then finally we come up with the winner, and we come up with what the computer picked. And the reason we need what the computer picked is because after playing, we need to show what did the computer pick. All right. So this is the function that is called when the event listener captures any of those events. So this is the function where everything happens. So we have what the computer picked, what the user picked, and then this calculate results returns the winner and the what the computer picked. So we can grab them. We can say const winner and then computer pick is equals to the calculate result. So calculate results gives us the winner and the what the computer picked. All right, so we can alert here and say alert winner winner. So if we click, we see the winner doesn't show us the winner. So let's go back and see what the issue is. So it should tell us the winner. So something might be wrong. So we do have the winner here. We do get the random. So we do get the random. So that's math.flow, then math.random, then you multiply by 3. So everything is correct there. Then we do the choices. And then we get the random. And then we create a variable for the winner. And then we switch based on the rock. We see the rock. We go to the user picked and then the winner. Then you go to the paper. So if the user picked rock, the computer wins. And then now this one is a tie because paper and paper. And then this one is the user wins. Finally, you have the scissors. So we do have the user picked the rock. The winner is the user picked the paper, the computer wins, and then finally the tie, and then finally we return the winner and the computer pick. So up here, what we do is that we do grab the user pick. What did the user pick? We pass it to the calculate result so that it can give us the winner and the computer pick. And then we alert, and then the alert is not working. So let's refresh this and see. So the alert is not working. So let's try console logging this. So console.log the winner. And then the winner. So and then we inspect this and see. So the winner is a computer. The winner is a tie. The winner is a computer. So everything is working. So let's continue. So the very next thing we need to do is we need to start updating the DOM. So in this, I'm going to use it as is. All right. I hope you can see. So I'm going to start updating the DOM. I think that one is okay. So I'm going to start updating the DOM. And the very first thing I want to update is what the user picked. So if I go back to my HTML, we have a div for that. And the class is user-pick. So this is what we are going to identify first, and the computer pick. So let's start with the user picked. So you can say here, update the DOM. And then we can document. So I'm going to write this inline without having to create variables for it because it's simpler. So the .user pick. So that one will give us access to this. It is below the results. And then the user pick. And then we have a property for the text content. The text content is going now to insert the text inside the paragraph tag, which is this paragraph tag. It is going to insert the text content is whatever is in between as text. And then we say you picked, and then we say user pick dot to upper case. So we just use this user pick that the user picked, and we show them. And then we can copy paste this below here so that we can have what the computer picked. So if we go back here, we can see the computer pick is the computer dash pick. So we can say computer dash pick, then the text content, we can say the computer picked, and then we have the computer pick dot to uppercase. So we do insert the text content here, which the text is computer picked. So this is first getting the element and then setting its text property to this. And then the next thing we need to do, let's first test that. So I can say I picked the rock. So I picked the rock. The computer picked scissors. So then the final thing we need to show is the display heading. So you can see this display heading is a heading tag. Currently it is none, but we just simply get it and insert the winner there. So let me do that. So we do have that. And then the next thing we need to do is that we get the display heading dot query selector, and then we say display heading dot text content as well is equals to. Now we need to generate a response. So we need to know because we already have the winner, we cannot just show the winner. We need to give them a very nice message. And finally, as I told you, is that in our card, this card, it returns different colors based on whether you win, lose, or is a tie. So for the tie, it's blue. For the loss, it's red. And for the win, it's green. So what we can do is that we can create a function. Let me just create it here below this. Then say const generate response is equals to a function. So I'm just creating a function that will help me do all this. And then what I can say, if the winner is equals to tie, so let's assume they tied. So we can return the message of, this is a message, a simpler message. So it is a tie. And then we can return a color of blue. And then we can do copy paste it 2 times. But the last one will be the default one. So we don't care. And then we can say if the winner was the user, we can say you won. You won. And then if you win, we give you a color of green. And then finally, we did not add an if because this is the last option. It will always be the last option. This is when the computer wins. So you have three possibilities. Computer won. And then if the computer won, then here we get red. So this is basically a function. We don't need, we actually need the function. So we technically don't need the function, but it's easier because now, right now, to get the message to show on the display heading, we basically call the generate response and then dot message, just that, because we already have our messages here. So if it was a tie, we know it is a tie and we give the color. If it was a user who won, this is a very user-friendly message in the color of green, and then the computer as well. And then so if I play, now you can see it's a tie because I picked a paper. Computer picked a paper, it's a tie. Okay, scissors, I picked scissors, the computer picked papers, I won. The final thing is to change the color of the border of the card. So to do that is quite simple because our border has the class of card, we can grab them. So the document.query selector, query selector, and then we select the card. Okay, dot style. So dot style dot border color equals to generate response dot color. Just that. And then if we do that, the rock. So I picked the rock, the computer picked the rock, it's a tie, we show the blue border. I picked the paper, the computer picked the paper, it's a tie. I picked the rock again, the computer picked the paper, the computer won, I see the red border. And then the scissors, I picked the scissors, the computer picked the rock, the rock crushes the scissors, the computer won, the border is red. And this is the final code for the template. So I don't know how you can see it. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it simple? Let me know in the comments. Share with your friends and see you then. Thank you. Subscribe to the channel as well.